session of Irish History from the Hedgerow at the Irish Roots Cafe, produced by IrishRoots.com with Peter Riley Adams and Michael O'Loughlin. Find a spot on the warm, sunny side of the hedgerow now. Today's session is about to begin. They were rough, unpolished men, brilliant scholars, teaching by the side of the road, in small rooms, in nooks and crannies, wherever and whenever possible. Such men as these, they were the teachers of the Hedge.
For almost 60 years, Eamon De Valera was a central figure in the history of Ireland and a series of magnificent events. He was a maker of history, a man of action, a revolutionary, a statesman, and some see him as the father of modern Ireland. But we're going to put this kind of in sections for De Valera because it was 60 years of his involvement, from being a superintendent of a battalion in Dublin in the Rising of 1916 to him being president of Ireland some many years later. We'll start with a small biography of Eamon De Valera. Eamon George Edward De Valera was born in New York City to Catherine Cole from Brewery, County Limerick, and Vivian De Valera of Cuba on October the 14th, 1882. William Gladstone was Prime Minister of England, Victoria was the Queen, Benjamin Harrison was President of the United States, and Charles Stewart Parnell, the uncrowned King of Ireland, who at the time was a Member of Parliament, was in the Kilmainham jail in Dublin. William Grace was the mayor of New York, and William Grace had been born in County Leith and was the first Catholic mayor of New York. Little is known of Vivian De Valera. He was a musician, the son of a Spanish-Cuban sugar planter. They had come from Spain to Cuba, and he died at the age of 30 when Eamon was only 2 years old. Catherine Cole was a beautiful big woman, gifted with intelligence and personality. She emigrated to the United States in 1879 with her brother Edmund, who then lived in Connecticut. Catherine and Vivian were married on September the 19th, 1881. And in 1884, Vivian De Valera died. Catherine was confronted with the caring of a child and the making of a living all alone. Her brother Edmund, who had been in Connecticut, had contracted malarial fever, and he was going back to Ireland to recover, and so it was decided to take young Eamon back to Ireland with him. Days after they departed New York, his grandfather De Valera arrived from Cuba to take the boy back. The deed had been done. What might have happened if he had arrived just a day earlier? A little notion of history there, that Eamon went to Ireland rather than to Cuba, and the history of both countries in the 20th century, how they were altered. An interesting fact, I think. But back in Knockmore, Brewery, County Limerick, was Catherine's mother, Elizabeth, and her brother, Patrick, and it was they who would take the responsibility of raising the boy. Eamon arrived in Ireland when he was 3 years old. His grandmother was an Irish speaker, and it was from her that he learned his first Gaelic words. Growing, he spoke with a Limerick brogue, and his American accent faded. Patrick Cole was a Landleaguer. The Landleaguers were followers of Parnell, and they were interested in having the rents reduced and the properties, the potential of the property being bought by the person who was doing the tillage of the property. Because of Patrick's involvement with the Land League, it was in his house that a lot of the neighbors would meet and discuss and argue the political issues of the day. And it was here that young Eamon first heard of the troubles in Ireland. Little did the young De Valera know what the future would hold for him and his new country of Ireland. When he was 5 years old, he went to the local school in Bruree, where the schoolmaster's name was John Kelly. And he excelled, but it was like we would call grade school in America. At 4, he went to the school of the Christian Brothers in Rutluck, or Charlesville at the time. In that school, he was an excellent student, very diligent and conscientious. He was excellent at mathematics. His uncle Patrick supported Eamon in his educational endeavors, and at 16, he was sent to Black Rock College in Dublin. The year of his arrival was 1898. And of course, in 1898, they were remembering 200 years of the Revolution, or the Rising of 1798. So there was a lot of political talk going on in Dublin, too. And he soon became one of the most promising students with a strong interest, along with his math, towards physics and astronomy. He left Black Rock College and earned his graduation in mathematical science at the Royal University. That was 1904. He then did postgraduate work in higher mathematics and a diploma in education. He was looking to teach. He also considered becoming a priest, and this may explain in some why later, when he was Taoiseach, he always was interested in the approval of the Catholic hierarchy on any legislation before the Dáil.
Well, and I saw that he was a lifelong devotee of rugby, and that was certainly by the time he was in Blackrock. And one of his students, when he became a teacher of math, was actually Kevin Barry, who became very well known later, and he was actually executed in the Irish War of Independence.
Well, yes, Kevin Barry, and there's a great song about Kevin Barry, 18 years old, and he was hanged. That's a good one.
That's right. And of course, he was an Irish speaker and a language activist. Really, his whole life, he was always trying to bring that language back, even when they got down to writing the Constitution, to the name of the country and the usage of the language. And of course, he was a member of the Gaelic League from at least 1908 onwards.
Yes.
And that's where he met. Didn't he meet somebody important there? That would have been his wife.
You mean in the school?
Yes.
Well, as he was studying, Irish, and he was in the Leinster School of Irish, that what actually was going on is she was the teacher, and so he went, and then because she was also an actress, an amateur actress, and she did some of that acting, and he would go. They say in later years, he wasn't so much, you didn't see him out a lot. He loved the radio, listening to the radio. He read poetry. People found that very interesting, and he thought everybody should read poetry. And they said, as a world leader, he's one who will go back home and read his poetry, and found that very interesting. But some of the influences, and obviously were there, but in 1883, when Eamon was only 1 and still in the United States, Douglas Hyde, who was destined to become the first president under the De Valera Constitution in 1937, founded the Gaelic League. And while a student at Trinity College, Hyde, and who was of the Protestant ascendancy, he was very interested in Irish culture and in Irish things. Well, De Valera joined that league in 1908. And of course, because the league was very interested in language and in the arts. So there was a thing, and that's when he wanted to learn more of the language. So he went to the school, and where he met his eventual wife, Sinead O'Flanagan.
Oh, the O'Flanagans. That's a fine Irish name, isn't it?
It certainly is. Also in 1905, Arthur Griffith, also to be a future leader, founded Sinn Féin, and its interest was politics. Well, these two organizations would become a point of reliance for Eamon De Valera, and of course many others. And because of this new enthusiasm for native culture, De Valera enrolled himself at the Leinster College of Irish. But it was these two great influences. And if you look, here he's born in the year Hyde, or just the year before Hyde founds this Gaelic League. In '05, here's the political league, and now Eamon is in Dublin, and he's surrounded by this kind of thinking. And his teacher at the school, of course, was this young lady, and they said she was very petite, golden-haired, very pretty, and as an amateur actor, she had great interest in the Gaelic theater. Well, now their interests are coming together. She also acted in one of the first Gaelic plays ever produced at the time, and it was a piece written by Hugh O'Neill, and here's what she played in that, which is also fascinating. She'd acted in the part of the Spanish ambassador. Well, this got to Eamon because he was still interested that he was too Spanish, as his father, though in Cuba, was from Spain. And here's this young lady who he's attracted to in the Gaelic League, and she's playing the part of the Spanish ambassador. Well, he became very, very interested. And, of course, his interest grew in Miss O'Flanagan, and their friendship grew, and then they were married in January of 1910. They had 7 children. 5 boys and 2 girls.
There was one more thing I wanted to go back up on just a little bit. There's been some recently new research being done on Edward De Valera, or Eamon De Valera, on his father, Juan Vivian De Valera, or sometimes you'll find it earlier written as De Valero. And they've had some trouble locating the records, the marriage records back in the church in New York, and some of the birth records of Eamon's father, and it's been quite a thing. They've dug up the birth certificate, and they found that was actually changed later. He was originally named George De Valera, and then later, some people say 10 years later, some people say 30 years later, it was changed to Edward De Valera. And even later, his mother remarried to a Mr. Wheelwright. And even then, they left him in Ireland. He had found his place, so it seems like it was meant to be.
Eamon De Valera did come back to the United States, but never as a moving element. He came when he was trying to raise money for the Irish cause, and he wanted to talk to Irish Americans and Irish-born who were living here in the United States. And so he did come back and try to, he traveled actually all over the country, but he did go visit his mother. But there's also a great little story about his mother, this woman who lived and died in the United States, but apparently in Rochester, New Jersey, where she was living in about 1942. There's a great little story. It says the pastor of the church there invited all present in the old school hall on Monroe Avenue in Rochester to participate in a spelling bee. About 50 people accepted the invitation, including lawyers and teachers and many others. Then something very unexpected happened. A frail-looking woman came forward. She was plainly dressed, and as she started to mount the steps of the stage, some of those present began to laugh at her simplicity. And she was asked by one of the participants if she realized that a spelling match was about to be held. She smiled, and without answering the question, took her place with the others. About a half hour or so went by, and only 4 remained in the contest: a lawyer, a teacher, a businessman, and this very plainly dressed and unassuming-looking lady. In 5 minutes more, only 2 sat on the stage: the schoolteacher and the frail-looking lady. The people in the hall were now greatly excited. Surely the schoolteacher would win. The last word was given out to spell was the most difficult. It was the teacher's turn to make the first attempt. She became nervous, asked for a glass of water, failed to spell it. Then plainly dressed lady, without a moment's hesitation, spelt the word as it should be. Who was this simple-looking woman sitting on the stage? She was no other than the mother of Eamon De Valera, president of the Irish Free State. At that time, she was known to the members of the parish as Mrs. Charles Wheelwright, having married again after the death of her first husband.
Boy, that's really a good story. I had never heard that before, and that reminds me of one thing. You've talked often, I've heard you talk about the influence of religion on Eamon De Valera, and how it's traced all the way through his career, even in the things he wrote into the government, and I'm sure you'll talk about that later. But, his people have often asked, well, why didn't he actually join a religious order? He was so, some people, he had such a devotion, and his brother, actually, his half-brother, Father Thomas Wheelwright, actually did join the religious life. And I just thought it was interesting that his family maintained that theme even through his half-brother and his mother.
Yes.
It's very good.
He was very, very devoted to the Catholic Church, and that was seen in his being Taoiseach, or Prime Minister, and in his presidency. He held to his faith and he held to his morals. That's the one thing the English and everybody, even his enemies in government in Ireland, said about him. He doesn't change. He's the same. And the more you study or discover of Eamon De Valera, he was probably one of the greatest unwatched men in history. For the rest of the world, it is. Of course, in Ireland, I have a friend of mine who grew up in Ireland, and I asked her about, well, what do they do? Do they talk much about De Valera? And she says, talk about him. She said, we have to learn everything about him. Every bit we have to learn, because De Valera is the man.
Well, and do you know, just to end up that religious theme, I had read that he had asked to be buried in religious habit when the time came. Have you heard anything of that?
Well, when you're a member of a third order in the church, there's the first order is priests and brothers. The second order is nuns, the male-female thing. And the third order are people who are a supportive part of an order, yet can have the habit. It's not the full habit, it's a smaller habit, but you're still part of an order. And I believe that he was a third order member, and that he was then entitled to be buried in a habit.
Very interesting. That's something you really don't see much about when you're doing all this reading.
Well, and especially today, people don't make reference to the habits anymore because they're not worn as much as they were. After the 60s and Vatican Council, things changed.
Well, and you know how interesting it is that it only takes a generation to forget something that was really a daily part of life.
How true, how true. With all we talk of De Valera, the name of De Valera, they say, was flaming across the Irish skies. The ballad makers were busy too, and it is said that the boys and girls of the countryside were out there singing, "Up De Valera, he's the champion of the right. We'll follow him to battle 'neath orange, green, and white. And when we next challenge England, we'll beat her in the fight, and we'll crown De Valera King of Ireland."
Excellent, just excellent.
So that will close our segment on Eamon De Valera, but we will be back on another one looking at the Civil War, his first term as the opposition, and then his final becoming Taoiseach and then President of Ireland.
Boy, I'm really looking forward to those, Peter. I don't know anybody else that knows as much as you in our area anyway about De Valera and Irish history, and I'm looking forward to the next lessons from the Hedge. So ends this chapter of Irish History from the Hedgerow. The entire series is available at www.irishroots.com. We have broadcast series on genealogy, song, local history, as well as original publications for every county in Ireland. The Hedge School in Ireland was totally reliant upon the local community to survive, just as we are here today in our modern-day Hedge School. If you believe in what we are doing for your community, please do send us your support. You can sponsor a session of Irish Hedgerow history for as little as $100 and become a recognized scholar of the Hedge. You will also receive a pass or letter of introduction from the instructors here at the school, as was the custom of the Hedgerow. So keep the Hedge growing with your donation, subscription, or membership. Thank you. We have been available for speaking engagements, exhibits, tours, and educational events since 1984. You can reach us at the Irish Roots Cafe on Twitter and Facebook, and on our homepage at www.irishroots.com, by mail at our U.S. location, the Irish Roots Cafe, Box 7575, Kansas City, Missouri 64116. Leave a message on our phone recorder at 256 3360. Copyright 2009.